We're going to be finishing the soul and its influence. And if we have time, we're going to go into chapter 2, which is Theurgy. And I'll explain what that is in a moment, if we get to that place. We've been talking about how the heavens and how things within the heavenly realm influences the soul. We talked about the different compartments of the soul, or the different types of sections of the soul. We have an animal soul, we have a godly soul, a divine soul, and all of that works in concert together to animate the body and give us the ability to accomplish what we're supposed to accomplish while we're on this earth. An explanation that was given to us the other night in class was actually apropos to this class, and I would like to bring it down. We've heard many times in the concepts of Brislov that the world that we live in is an illusion. We've heard this, correct? It's an illusion. And why do we say it's an illusion? Not in the sense that we as human beings perceive something as an illusion. It's a scientific thing. Here's the example. The same atoms that make up you and I are the same atoms that make up this desk. And the same atoms that make up this desk makes up my car and makes rocks and trees, etc., etc. All of these atoms have a source. And the question is if that source were to cease to generate these atoms, would the things that we see around us in physicality exist? Well, we know, and there's ample scientific theory that says that there is something that generates these atomic particles that keep them moving. They're always moving. Even though it looks still, it's always moving at all time. And according to many great scientists today, they're coming to this reality that there is a source, and what they call a sort of maybe a mathematical God source. That's how they explain it. They tend to be not religious people. But they said there's something that sustains it. And the reason why you and I know that this is true, we understand the concept that God is. He is. We and He exist. We do not exist outside of the Creator, right? As a matter of fact, we don't exist. We are only here on the will of the Creator. All of physicality has come about because the Creator designed it and implemented it. And He used it as an opportunity to hide Himself so that we could have true free will. He sort of withdrew Himself, and the reason why is that creation is the lowest level. Creation is the lowest level of that which extends from the Creator. If you can imagine, the Creator is this infinite being that is everything. Everything exists because of Him. Nothing can exist outside of Him. He is the source of everything. Therefore, if the Creator were to withdraw that last element that keeps the creation going, we would disappear. Everything would cease to exist. So we're understanding that. So this whole concept is that we in physicality have this sort of energy flow that comes from the divine to us, and it's constant. We're created every day. Every minute there's creation that creates us. And therefore, those people who are connected to the highest level of God's divine nature are not, and I love what Psalmist David Melech says, that renew within me a clean heart. Renew within me. It's like a daily renewal that takes place. We understand that God's mercy endures forever, and that His goodness and kindness is something that is renewed every day in our life. With that being said, what we're learning is this idea that there is a communication also that exists within us, and it's not a respecter of persons, because there are people who may not deserve to have received some kind of divine download, and they get it anyway. They get it in their sleep. There are people that have powers of deduction that allow them to exercise some level of wisdom, and they use it in some types of dark magic or dark arts, and we'll talk about that in the next section. And it says here, and we go back to paragraph 6 on page 189. It says, and I'm going to go back to the top so we can refresh. It says, the highest wisdom deemed it appropriate to divide the day into two parts, for the activity and the other for rest. The daily cycle is thus divided into day and night, day being the time of activity and night being the time of rest. God also gave living creatures a nature causing them to sleep, so that both they and their spirits should rest from the normal activity. At that time, their strength is renewed both physically and spiritually, and they awake in the morning again ready for their daily task. We've known that Shabbat is like our nighttime. It's a time of renewal and rest. A great example given by Rabbi Marcus that spoke Monday. He says that the reason why Shabbat is such an important day is that God spent 6 days veiling himself and creating layers to give us free will and to give us the ability to make decisions on our own. But it is during Shabbat that he rests. What does he rest from? Does God rest because he's tired? Of course not. That'd be ludicrous, right? Does God rest because he needs a nap, because he's just such an old man? No, of course not. So what did he rest from? He rests from hiding himself. Shabbat becomes a day in which the Creator rests from hiding himself. And that's why it says that on Shabbat, we begin to have a thinning out of the layers of cloaking and the layers of the obscurity of God in creation, and that we can truly at Shabbat find him in a way that we can't find him throughout the week. The rest that we receive, now catch this, is the opposite. The rest that we receive on Shabbat, 6 days we spend toiling in physicality, seeing God in nothing that we do. We work, we toil, we fix, we cook food, we discipline our children. On Shabbos, we rest from the toil and the struggle, and we find ourselves closer to Hashem. Why Shabbos is so important. It's not about not doing stuff. It's about doing one thing, and that is connecting to God in the most beautiful way. As everyone knows, it is at night that friends share secrets, couples make plans, family come together. It's a very private, intimate moment, for the day is full of intimacy and too noisy of a time to unpack one's heart and commune. The same holds true when it comes to communicating with the heavens as well, for that happens at night when we receive an out-and-out message of images from heaven, mere dreams or near prophecies. Something happens at the nighttime that we cannot begin to explain. That's why we tell Hashem, we let him know at night before I go to bed, I commit my soul to you, O God. Pray that any sin, any transgressions, any difficulties that I have brought upon myself that would cause me to not have your goodness in my life, forgive me of those sins and preserve my soul in some level of righteousness. And if you take my soul before I wake, I pray that you would give me an opportunity to stand before you in a shower of your loving kindness and mercy. To be sure, though, at night, a lot of those images are simply offshoots of the day. Now, we talked about dreams. You remember this? We mentioned this about dreams. Some of this is from the offshoot of the day. What do we mean? You have activity. How many have very vivid dreams? Do you guys have vivid dreams? No? Yes? I have very vivid dreams, and then I have some points that I have useless dreams. Right? Completely useless dreams. And I can't, you can't explain them. You're standing on the bridge pressing your finger, and the next thing you know, you're eating a hamburger. It has make no sense, right? There's no significance to it, and we understand that these are the byproducts of our psychological processes. And sometimes I wonder when I have a night of all those kinds of sleep, I'm thinking, what kind of useless information have I been pumping through my cranium during the day that I had these kind of silly dreams? There are other dreams that are affected by the food we eat, right? Maybe too much pasta before we go to bed, too much chulin, whatever it may be. And those would be dreams and nightmares rather than messages from heaven. But there are times in the course of the flights that the godly component of our soul takes us into another realm. I know that there are many of you who are very spiritually connected, especially those people who are on your journey to Torah Judaism, and you've had a serious heart of attaching yourself to the Creator. You've had those dreams at night in which you felt an interaction of a higher spiritual level, and it was without a doubt you understood something. Something opened up. There are those who have told me of going to sleep at night and waking up in the middle of the night with something that they'd been studying for weeks on end, and all of a sudden they receive knowing. They receive knowing to hunt into a different area to find the answer to it. That is probably one of the most fantastic levels. Not all of us receive that and have it all the time. And as I mentioned last week in the closing of the class, there are some people who have this kind of quote-unquote activity, but it is in reality some level of mental illness. And the only way that you're going to be able to differentiate the two is to know the truth, to know what the Torah actually says. Because a lot of people can develop mental illnesses in which they hear voices and they truly believe that they're communicating with people. And, you know, I would love to think that everybody that has that ability are connected at a higher spiritual level, but in reality, I'm not sure that that is the case. Though we understand one can talk to the dead. One can perform spiritual or mystical things that we can't really understand why it's happening, and we'll discuss it in the next chapter. The soul then gets a sense of certain things which it is allowed to transmit back to us. And it does that step by step, grade by grade, until what to be communicated nestles somewhere in our being where it projects itself into the mind as images. That's what dreams that are spiritually connected, God gives you a message. How many of you ever had anything that you felt that like it was a message from God in your sleep? I'm just curious. Hand raised? 1, 2, 3. That's a pretty profound thing when you see that. 4? One on Facebook? Good. We saw you on Facebook too. I mean, I'm telling you, it's a very profound thing to have that happen. And there's no way to explain it. And for sure, if we're all honest with ourselves, we all know it's not because we're that spiritual. It's this something happens. It's this Hashem opens up a little avenue, allows your soul to see something. Who knows why He allows that? Now, not all such images are true or wholly so. Let me explain. Some of them are combined of mere dream stuff, as we said before, while others of them are pure communication. And some of them, thanks to the agents that God allows to communicate with us, many or may actually allow our glimpse into the future. In any event, true communication comes from a heavenly source, which then passes it on to the soul, from where it then enters into the creative mind, rather than the rational mind, which isn't part of the process and inoperative in sleep. We are now on the latter part of the middle part of 6, 191. We're on the third paragraph, or the third little section here under 6. So a person can receive knowledge about his or her future or another person's future. There are people who have the capability through whatever methods, mentalism, God knows what, to be able to divine the future on some people. But according to the sages of Judaism, they're only able to go so far down the road. They cannot tell the ultimate end of a human being's life, etc. If a heavenly source, in this case, is angelic, the communication is legitimate and rooted in holiness. Whereas if the source is demonic, it's not. The trick, of course, is to know the source of one's images. Many a failure has resulted from such misreadings. I would suggest that if you've ever been in a situation, it's good to if you have a dream that you feel might have divine source or angelic source, then you need to consult with a proper rabbi to know.
It's a well-known Kabbalist. He says a dream uninterpreted is like a letter unopened.
Right.
And then he goes on to say, if you'll write your dreams down consistently, if you can remember them, not pizza dreams, but
right.
dreams, then you'll see a pattern or
right.
a trend
right.
or a message over a period of time.
Right.
That you can understand what's going on.
Yeah, and I truly believe that if it's from a legitimate source, as we said, an angelic source, you're going to be able to find the connection. It won't take long before you to say, oh, I see how these are related in. But it's important. You have to know Torah to understand that. Now, there is an entirely different order of communication. And it says, if that spiritual force is next one. All dreams, however, are intermingled with the distorted images originated from imagination itself. Our sages thus teach us, it is impossible to have a dream that does not contain worthless information. There is entirely a different category of dream, however, which involves true prophecies. These will be discussed in a separate section later on. So while we're in this section on dreams, let's take a moment, because I'd like to go into the next chapter of Theurgy, but my problem is I want to really devote more than 20 minutes to it. Do you understand what I'm saying before we go into the next section? Should we continue the discussion here on dreams and then save that for tomorrow? Continue on? Okay, we'll continue on. We're getting an input from people on the outside. So, okay, we'll continue on. Theurgy. What is theurgy? My eyes were open to a new concept, and we did a podcast on it this week called catastrophizing. Catastrophizing. I didn't even know it was a word, okay? So I learned it from my beautiful son-in-law. And it's a condition that most people have. It's a psychological term that most people have that thinks that things are bigger than what they really are. More problematic, more difficult, end of the world. The sky's falling type deal. Well, here's a new word, theurgy, and it is the operation or effect of a supernatural divine agency in human affairs. The operation or effect of a supernatural or divine agency in human affairs. It says in paragraph 1, in the previous section, we have discussed how all created things originate in the transcendental forces. These forces are arranged in a logical system with various divisions from which the different categories of a physical phenomenon is derived. Okay, now we might end up having to spend a long time just on the first section, okay? Okay, once again, we're going to go back to the concept of physicality and why physicality was created. Why did God create physicality? He created physicality so that he could fully reveal himself to the lowest level that exists inside of him, right? The very lowest level. So imagine if I wanted to reveal myself and the complexities of who I am as a human to an ant, and had that capability, then there would be things that I would want to do to produce an environment where that ant could begin to experience the knowledge and maybe experience something that would say, this is something like the higher part of creation. Well, God himself, it says that he withdrew himself, but God can't withdraw himself from anything, can he? Why? He's in everything. He exists. You see, we don't exist, we just are because He exists. Right? Everything that we see around us doesn't exist. It is just because He states it, because He creates it, because He is the source. So God merely had to cloak Himself by using physicality. He put us in this place based on molecules that emanate from Him, pure energy that emanates from Him. And He's so pure that if He were to reveal Himself at His highest level, everything at this lower level would cease to exist. Does it make sense? You follow me? Okay, good. Hopefully, kind of. If God were to reveal Himself fully, we would lose free will, number one. And second of all, fully, we would probably cease to exist. Why? Because we'd be consumed by Him. We'd be completely returned back to our original source, pure energy. Now, with that being the case, Hashem, knowing that, He creates these layers. So if you're going to picture the infinite source of creation, which he talks about it says in previous sections we've discussed how all created things originated in its transcendental forces, meaning that we all have an original source. What is our original source? It's that which exists, which is God. He is the only thing that exists truly. That means that the layers of creation that He produced helps to filter the energy that comes to the lowest level. You following? Like if I want to look at the sun, I am required to have special lens that would allow me to do that, because if I didn't, my retinas would be burnt out, right? So you can't just look at the sun. It's the very same thing that the Creator has built these different layers, and that every human being created on this earth, if he will begin to search after and to find Hashem, then he will find Him at the level that it was designed to be revealed. Everybody doesn't have the same level of revelation or understanding of God as others. Just like we have radio waves that follow the air. I mentioned this the other day. Right now there are billions of digital and audio signals going through the air. And that without the proper radio equipment, we have no clue what's being played around us. And that exists forever. It doesn't dissipate. It continues to go on forever and ever, this radio signals. So they say that radio signals that had left this earth 150, 100, or 75 years ago is still out in space somewhere. The energy that God projects to sustain all of creation comes from a source. Now the words here are going to use a concept called, that we find ourselves in the root. But we can't think of the root being what we have in plant life. It's upside down. When we say all of us in the physicality has a root in the divine source, it's up. It's like an upside down tree. Does that make sense? You following? Okay, so let's read on. He says, we have likewise discussed the evil forces from which all the evils in the physical world originate. We have furthermore explained how the primary essence of every physical thing is that which exists in its transcendental roots. You see the text there? Mm-hmm. That which exists on the physical plane is merely a reflection of what is originated and composed in the higher level. Everything we see around us in the earth and physicality originates somewhere else. Now, when we say that it originates somewhere else, it doesn't mean that if we were to leave here, we would actually be in another physicality. But it does mean that if we were to leave this physicality and be drawn back to its original source, you would find that everything in physicality is sourced from that one place. Does it make sense? Are you following me? It's sourced from there. Moshe Rabbeinu, what did he do? He goes to Mount Sinai, and it says that God gave him all the plans for the temple. What temple was he getting where was he getting the plans from? He went to the original source. Do you understand that? He saw the temple that was made in the heavenlies. How do you know that? When Ezekiel measured the measurement of the temple, what temple was he measuring? Was it Solomon's temple? No. He was measuring the third temple. Where's the third temple? It exists in the transcendental level. It exists in the spiritual level. Now, is that a physical building? Or is it a building that exists inside the mind of the Creator? Whatever that is. Because when we say the mind of the Creator, it's an anthropomorphic term that says, well, I have a mind, so God has a mind. But it's so high, it's so elevated that all we understand is everything that exists already inside of Him. That is a complete mind blower. Now, why do we mention the word theurgy? Is the fact that inside of all of creation, there is a mechanism and formula to be able to tap into these levels of things that emanate from the Creator. And just like there are natural laws, there are spiritual laws that exist as well. There are those who have been able to tap into high levels of Kabbalah and to be able to accomplish amazing things. There are stories in which we're not going to get into in this chapter of methodology, but there are stories that we hear of Solomon being able to traverse the earth and know things about different parts of the earth that nobody else knew. How did he do it? There are many different theories on that. It says that King David, by quoting the sacred name of God, one of the sacred names of God, was able to keep water from flooding flooding the whole city of Jerusalem, coming up when they were getting ready to clear the land for the Temple Mount. I don't even understand that stuff. It says that there is a sacred name of God that if you threw a metal object into water and it sunk, it would float back up. It says that Moshe went to pick up the bones of Yaakov, and his bones were in a box in the Nile. And Moshe knew the sacred names of God to pull the box and cause it to float to the top of the water. I don't even understand that. There are things that you can do. But just like there are things to do that which is righteous, there are also dark arts that people can access things that they should not do. Now, if you recall, we said that these transcendental forces in the heavens form a backdrop of everything in the earth. We just mentioned that. And a lot of them are arranged in a specific order with particular roles. Recall as well, as we pointed out, that there are distinct transcendent forces behind evil as well. And finally, recall that we depicted the transcendent forces as the sublime and ethereal counterparts of things. So within the world, there is this perfect balance between that which is pure and righteous and that which is unholy and evil, Rasha. So we mentioned this the other day, that the reason why I know that ultimate righteous and tzaddiks exist in this time, right before Mashiach is coming now, is I look at ISIS. Where you see that, it's ultimate evil. I mean, they're constantly showing videos of cutting people's heads off and finding creative ways to dismember children and destroy life. And if that exists, then the counter of that means that there are some amazing tzaddiks in the world. When I think about what we're doing in Kiru of outreach in the Jewish world and in the non-Jewish world, bringing universal Torah value, I realize that something fantastic is happening in the world, and we're actually are seeing righteousness being elevated to a higher level. And the more righteousness there is, you understand that there is more evil. If the evil didn't exist, I would be very concerned that there's even righteousness in the world. This is what we're talking about. It's this perfect counterbalance, and that everything has its source, meaning that even that which is evil has its source within the divine. Now that's hard for us to comprehend. It has its source within the divine. God thus granted humankind the ability to manipulate the natural courses of events through natural means. How does he do that, or why does he do that? Because these transcendental forces needn't always follow a chain of command. We depict the last time they can be made to veer off course, to affect change in other unexpected ways, and there is a And that's where theurgy comes in mind, meaning that with some assistance in divine knowledge or supernatural knowledge, you can actually change events that are sort of etched in stone. And that's why we pray, right? There are certain things that are set out as God's divine purpose, and that prayer can be something that can change the outcome of something. God thus granted humankind the ability to manipulate the natural course of events through natural means, and we granted certain special souls the right to do that through supernatural means. And while desperate, the two systems do have certain things in common. How many saw the video that was on Facebook last week with the Israeli mentalist that was on some of the Tonight shows and stuff like that? Did you guys get to see it? When you go home, type in, if you're online, don't do it now, do it later. Type in Israeli mentalist on, do you remember what show? Was it Jimmy Fallon?
Late night.
Yeah, Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. I think that's it. Yeah, Jay Leno, and there's a couple other places. But he was capable of completely manipulating a couple hundred people to do something that they all thought independently was doing their own thing. He's able to, by using psychology and reading faces and eyes, ticks, and all that stuff, he's capable of doing it all within natural means to reveal one of the actors that were there, his PIN number for his bank account. Now you tell me, who has that ability? Well, what we know is that there is a divide between, there are two separate systems, but there's something in common with the two, meaning that within natural psychology and the natural function of a human being, there's things called hypnosis, and there are things that can be read and are amazing, and then there are some supernatural things that if you knew the secrets to them, you could tap into them. Understand, of course, that while the changes we're capable of making today, thanks to advances in science and technology, are astounding and sometimes do seem to bump against the edges of the supernatural. For example, this mentalist. They're still all rooted in the laws of nature. They're still rooted in the laws of nature. This guy says that the reason why he was able to guess the actor's PIN number is by watching his eyes. And he would be real close to his eyes. And he says, you always blink on the number that he was having to count to 10. And he says, you always blink on the number that is your number. How does he know that? I don't know how he does that. Is that with everybody the same thing? It says that it's all rooted in the laws of nature, and that the inscrutable changes in the past that are often touted as being supernatural were usually sham, sleight of hand, and just plain trickery. So the modern reader is understandably skeptical, but we're assured that the supernatural changes do come about when those souls schooled in the process engage in it. Moshe was able to throw his rod down and it turned into a serpent. Was that duplicated? Yeah. Pharaoh's magicians came out and did the same thing. They understood these arts. Now what they couldn't defend themselves with, his serpent ate their serpent, which later turned back to a stick. It's an amazing thing. In any event, there are laws of the supernatural just as there are laws of the natural. Help me think of some things that if you were alive 250 years ago to 1,000 years ago, a natural event that could happen that you could think is supernatural. Anybody? Just throw it out there. There's no right answer. Just
The plagues.
the plagues. Perfect example. The plagues, as a matter of fact, they blamed it on the Jews in Europe because none of the Jews were dying because of their hygiene practices. And they said, oh, they must operate within black magic or something, and so they went out and killed them. There's a lot of things. I mean, we think about the plagues in Egypt. All of them happened within natural means. How it happens, who knows? Who can explain it? There are people out there in science that have tried to explain the darkness and the clouds and, as a volcano that took place, all those things. I believe that truly within all natural means, God will work in his creation. But he uses that thing to bring out a supernatural event, if that makes even sense. I'm going to stop there. So we're going to stop on let's stop on paragraph 2 on page 195, okay? And we'll pick back up in the next class.